After years of stillness, the wedding invitation showed up in a big envelope written in known handwriting. Emily, the younger sister. Emily, the golden child, the one I hadn't seen since I left that entire poisonous mess 7 years ago. She is the one who never questioned our father or his new wife. The arrogance was astounding. 7 years of nothing. No texts, no calls, no, "Hey, how's life?" And, all of a sudden, I'm invited to this great event, unlike anything else. It was not simply the invitation, though. Nestled among them was Emily's handwritten letter. She missed me, and wrote. She aimed to correct things. I fixed my gaze on that note. Sure, it was some elaborate hoax carried out by Helen, my stepmother. After all they went through, and considering their treatment of me, why today? Let me go back a little. Emily was 15, while our mother passed away when I was 18. It wrecked our planet, but my dad was already moving on, while I was still gassing over the death. 1 year later, he wed Helen. She was resolved from the start to completely remove Mom's traces. Family pictures gone. Mom's preferred decorations vanished as well. Young and sensitive, Emily hung on to Helen like a life raft. Though I couldn't blame her, I couldn't stand the woman or her dictation of everything. Things descended from terrible to worse. Dad turned away from me financially when I started college. "Man up," he remarked. Emily, meanwhile, was offered everything on a silver platter. Tuition, a new apartment, even a car. She learned responsibility, all paid for without considering it twice. I was just squeaking by, balancing part-time employment, working to start from nothing, and developing my event planning company. Naturally, Helen laughed at my efforts. Not me, Emily. The top student earned their support. I would have had enough eventually. Years of feeling like an alien in my own family had their effects. I sever relationships. Just silence. No drama, no major conflict. I stopped visiting, stopped phoning, and turned my attention to running my life. I threw myself into my work, and, to be honest, I flourished. My company expanded beyond my most ambitious projections. I was at last free, not depending on them. Which reminds me of the wedding invite. I wanted to toss it at first. Why ought I to give a damn? When I was struggling and needed them, they didn't give a damn about me. But something stopped me. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps Emily's note. I wasn't sure if it was sincere or merely another one of Helen's tricks. Still, I made the decision to go. If nothing else, I might observe how things worked and leave should it become intolerable. I was not going empty-handed, though. All the same, I wanted to treat Emily nicely. I volunteered to arrange her wedding, the whole service from my company, at a huge discount. She turned down gently. Helen said, she stated she had already handled everything. It stung, but I would have reached out olive branches. In their court was the ball. The evening before the wedding, sleep proved impossible. Memories were running through my head. Holidays when I was passed over while Emily glowed in front of Dad. Talks where Helen gently undermined me in front of Dad. Times when I knew I was no longer really part of the family. I reminded myself it made no difference. Not them, but Emily was the target here. Should everything fall apart, I could always leave. I got dressed in my best suit, the one I bought to honor obtaining a big client, and then headed to the site early in the morning. The space was amazing. Towering ceilings, diamond-like chandeliers, and flowers everywhere. They had spared no cost. I got a knot in my stomach as I stepped in. I had not seen my family in practically 10 years before now. Emily saw me first. She looked brilliant, and the tension relaxed momentarily. She gave me a hug and thanked me for coming. Then I noticed Helen watching me like a hawk from off to the side. She missed her eyes with her smile. "Welcome," she said, her voice full of manufactured honey. "Still running that tiny party business of yours?" Gritted my teeth and grinned back. "It's going well, thanks." She grinned and turned away. Standard Helen. Finding my place, I attempted to concentrate on the ceremony. Emily seemed really delighted, and for a bit I forgot about all the stress. Deep down, though, I realized it wouldn't be sustainable. In all senses, this was my family. Drama seemed unavoidable. The knot in my gut intensified as I entered the reception area. Not the venue. It was not. The setting was breathtaking. No, the knot sprang from the unavoidable meeting with my past. My name turned up on the seating chart. Table 13. To know where that was, I had no need of a map. Weddings operate as a social blueprint. At the prime tables, immediate family, then close friends, then extended family, and lastly, the hapless stragglers. Table 14 fell quite clearly into the "we don't care if you're here" zone. My neighbors were distant relatives I hardly remembered. Uncle George, who constantly droned about his stamp collection, and Aunt Mildred, who smelled like mothballs. The other two I couldn't even identify. Emily's friends and Helen's family were all gathered close to the dance floor as well. Naturally, front and center, Dad and Helen were reveling in their self-appointed VIP status. I laughed, unable not to help. This was quite usual of them. 7 years without communication, and they still made it quite evident I was an afterthought. I aimed to keep my calm. I filled a glass of water, looked about the room, and acted as though I was unconcerned. Then, though, the first landmine of the evening walked straight up to my table, Dave, and he obviously drank too much. "What the devil are you doing here, Matt?" he said, slurred. "You were not supposed to show up." Stunned, I fixed my gaze on him. I said, attempting to keep my voice cool, "I got an invitation. As evidence, I even took it out of my pocket." "Emily invited you," he said, snorting. His voice grew louder as he said, "You should have stayed where you belong. You're just here to embarrass us, aren't you? Showing up with your little party business like it means something." I could see eyes turning toward us. My face hurt with shame and rage. Helen showed up by his side, precisely timed as always, before I could reply. "Matt," she remarked with a sarcastic concern, "do you even make enough to buy that suit? Or is it rented?" I looked at her, then back at Dad, and understood there was no use. People like them cannot be reasoned with, particularly not considering their own sense of superiority and drunkenness on alcohol. I thus performed the only action I could. Rising, I straightened my suit and said, "Excuse me." I turned away without saying anything else. I did not, however, go right for the door. I stepped outdoors to the terrace, needing some time to clear my brain. One pleasant respite was the cold evening air. Still, the noises from inside continued to echo in my ears. Guilt, little party enterprise. God, they couldn't even let me exist without undermining me. Trying to determine what to do next, I leaned on the railing and watched out at the garden. Get away and never turn around. Retrace your steps inside and pretend none of it troubled you? Neither of the choices felt right. That's when I heard the music start inside, happy and lively, utterly opposite my own mood. I knew I ought not to stay. I owed no one anything. Staying on the room's boundaries to hide from observation, I turned around inside. I looked over to the event crew on my way out. They were laying plates with an efficiency I couldn't help but find in line with the next meal. About them, something felt familiar. It dawned on me as I slowed down and watched them go. I knew these people. These were not only hapless employees, these were my workers. My head went crazy. After recently acquiring a smaller event planning company, my company found out that this was one of their assignments. That the arrangement appeared so polished makes sense. That was my staff working on it. A weird spectrum of feelings swept over me. Pride, astonishment, and a mounting cynicism. Claire and Helen had engaged my company without even knowing it. Alternatively, they might have realized it and just not given a damn. In either case, the evening's power relations had changed drastically. All night for the first time, I felt as though I had the upper hand. I moved to the side and pulled out my phone to call my operations manager. With a hushed voice, "Hey, quick question," I said. "This wedding, are we running it?" There was a pause. Then, "Yeah, why?" I laughed, unable to help it. "No reason," I remarked. "Just wanted to confirm." I hung up and turned back toward the crowd, still adjusting to the knowledge that my team was running the wedding I had recently been embarrassed at. Then, I had a flash of insight like a thunderclap. My company was running everything, including the flowers, the lights, and the well-scheduled dinner service. Though the more strategic part of me understood there was a better way to handle this, part of me wanted to storm back inside and say, "Hey, guess what? All this? It's mine." Dad and Helen had gone out of their way to offend me, treating me as though I didn't belong. They most definitely didn't deserve the effort of my team if they didn't want me there. My hands shaking from exhilaration rather than from dread, I phoned my operations manager once more. "Hey, Kate," I said, attempting to project calm. "Could you verify the client's contract for tonight?" "Sure, Matt," she answered, visibly perplexed. "I will explain later," I said. "Just tell me, does the contract contain the usual termination clause?" Kate hardly had to search it out. "Yeah, hostile or discriminatory actions directed against management or staff entitle us to instantly stop services. Search bingo." "Perfect," I murmured, a grin starting to blossom on my face. "We're invoking it. Start packing up." Her end stopped for a moment. She said, "Wait, what happened? Is everything okay? Let's say the client has made it abundantly evident they do not want me or us here," I said. "I will fill you in later. Just trust me on this one." Kate did not hesitate. "Got it. I will handle it." I hung back, my heart thumping. That was it. Dad and Helen would have a nasty awakening if they believed they could treat me like garbage and still enjoy the results of my work. Mostly because it felt like the correct thing to do. I wasn't doing this out of spite. Okay, maybe a bit. I was about to allow them to treat me disrespectfully while profiting from my diligence. It was business. Personal was not involved. Inside, the welcome was running full tilt. Servers were presenting the first course as guests were socializing and the music was playing. On the surface, everything seemed flawless, but I knew anarchy was just waiting to start. Keeping appearances, my staff moved like a well-oiled machine, subtly packing supplies and tools. At first, visitors found nothing, which was evidence of their professionalism. I stayed outside observing from the terrace as the idea developed. My staff started gently removing decorations, rolling up table linens, and dismantling floral displays. It was like seeing a magician vanish a whole room without anyone knowing. Helen might have been able to minimize me, but she could not touch the caliber of my work or staff. The lighting crew's beginning of disassembling the uplights around the room marked the first hint of problems. A few visitors observed, pointing and murmuring, but none spoke yet. Of fact, Helen was too occupied, seated at her table attending court, to see what was happening. Dad vanished completely, most likely off sipping another drink. Whispering got louder as more and more decorations vanished. At last, one of the servers came up to Helen and spoke with her. Her face changed in a few short seconds from smug to enraged. Rising from her chair, she marched across the room, heels clicking like bullets across the marble floor. I heard her from the patio. "What's going on? Why are they wiping everything down?" The server seemed scared. "I'm not sure, ma'am. You will have to ask the event manager." She then noticed Kate, coolly guiding the crew. Helen dashed over, her voice rising with every stride. "What is this? What the world are you doing?" Kate showed no hesitation. "We're following the terms of the contract, ma'am. Hostile behavior toward our management is causing services to be terminated." Helen's blink was slow. "What hostile behavior? Who exactly is your management?" Kate waved in the direction of the patio I was on. Turning, Helen's gaze narrowed to meet me. I waved her a little, trying to project a neutral facial expression. Her face flushed with fury. She dashed outside. "You!" he hissed. "You cannot do this. Emily's wedding is upon us. And this is my company," I said, my voice cool. "You made it plain earlier that you value nothing I do. So why would you want my services?" Her mouth fell. "You're doing this to punish me, to wreck Emily's wedding." I gave my head a shake. "This isn't about Emily. It's about the way you and Dad treated me. You can't humiliate me and then expect me to provide top-notch service. That's not how this works." Trying to find a reply, Helen sputtered. Kate passed over before she could and handed me a copybook. "We're ready to release," she remarked. "Everything's packed." I answered by nodding. "Thanks, Kate. Great work as usual." Though I stayed around to find out, Helen seemed as though she may blow. I said, "If you have any questions about the contract, feel free to reach out to our legal team. Have a great evening," after handing her my lawyer's card, and I left her there stunned, walking away. The fallout was considerably more disorganizing than I had imagined. The reception hall was essentially empty by the time my squad unveiled. Still hanging from the ceiling, the chandeliers were about it. Not flowers, not table arrangements, not uplights. Visitors were murmuring and standing about perplexed. Emily seemed as though she could be crying, and for a moment I felt ashamed. Then I reminded myself, this had nothing to do with her. This relates to advocating for myself. There should have been gratification on the journey home. Really? I just oversaw one of the most fabled mic drops of my life, but I found myself conflicted as the tails of my team's trucks vanished in my rearview mirror. My expectations of the day were different from this. Still, I knew I had made the appropriate call. I stood up for myself for the first time in a long time, not only as a business owner, but also personally. Though the fallout started practically right away, I had little time to think about it. Text messages, missed calls, and voicemails exploded on my phone. Usually leading the charge with a series of enraged texts was Helen, long and disorganized. They were full of charges that I had spoiled everything and wrecked Emily's big day out of spite. Every one more theatrical than the previous. She railed, I can't believe you did this to Emily. You're a selfish, vindictive little boy who can't handle someone else being happy. You ruined this family's reputation. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" The messages continued endlessly, each one more deranged than the previous. She called me sad, accused me of ruining the wedding out of jealousy, and even insisted that I reimburse the whole cost of the event. The arrogance was nearly ridiculous. I didn't reply. I just turned off her number. She did not merit my effort. Dad followed not too long behind. Though less cogent, his voicemails were equally vicious. He threatened to sue, called me a selfish brat, and even hinted at phoning the police. Still, Emily delivered the most unexpected message. Though her text was full of hurt and uncertainty, I would have expected her to be enraged as well. "Why would you do this to me?" she penned. "I thought you came to support me. I didn't think you would wreck my wedding." That one struck harder than I anticipated. It was not like Dad's drunken outbursts or Helen's vitriol. This seemed to be real suffering, though I could still hear the sadness in her words. Emily and I hadn't been close in years. Though I wasn't sure it would matter, I wanted to reply to clarify my side. The scenario got worse early the following morning. True to tradition, Helen found she could not let it go. She began spinning the narrative in her favor, while phoning everyone, including friends, relatives, and anybody else who would listen. I wrote a generic SMS to the handful of relatives I still semi-trusted to prevent repeating myself. Long story short, I said, I terminated my company's services per the terms of the contract. If you have questions, ask Helen. If you want the truth, ask the venue staff. I'm done defending myself. One of my aunts answered practically right away. "Good for you," she said. "We observed how Helen treated you at Thanksgiving 5 years ago. She's always been awful to you. I'm just sorry Emily got caught in the middle. Her backing caught me off guard. Having spent so many years presuming the whole family had written me off, I hadn't given any thought to the likelihood some of them may be on my side." Next arrived the unanticipated guest fallout. By midday, I began receiving business questions and emails. Apparently, some of the wedding guests had heard about what had transpired, and some were pleased with how my staff had handled things. One woman contacted me to say she appreciated my staff's professionalism. I faintly recognized her as Emily's in-laws' family friend. She said, "I heard what happened and wanted to say your team handled everything with amazing grace. It was clear the issue wasn't with your company, but with the family. I'm hosting a charity gala in a few months and would love to work with you if you're available." Speak of a silver lining. I answered right away, appreciating her nice comments and arranging a time to go over the incident. I had 3 more emails from other guests a few hours later. It was unreal. The same wedding I had been accused of spoiling now served as free advertising for my company. Helen's attempts at humiliating me had failed rather badly. Helen was not done, of course. She had increased her attack on me online by nightfall. She had left a critical internet evaluation of my organization, accusing us of being unreliable and unethical. The review was full of straight lies, alleging we arrived late, gave inadequate service, and left the event without warning. I was fortunately ready for this. I got right away to see my attorney, and within hours, Helen received a cease and desist letter. The review was taken off the following day. Then arrived the threat of a lawsuit. The ridiculousness of it almost made me spit out my coffee. Helen and Dad were apparently demanding a complete refund and extra damages for emotional distress. Emotional pain since I included a clause they approved? Rich, is it? My attorney gave me his word. It was only a scare strategy. She stated, their lawyer sent a laughably vague letter with no specifics. They don't have a leg to stand on. About 2 weeks passed with legal back and forth, presumably because their attorney had the confidence to inform them they had no chance of winning. Helen and Dad continued pressing. My lawyer was behind the scenes gathering all the data required to permanently close this down. We had everything: Emily's original signed contract, staff witness testimonies, and security footage from the venue showing Dad's inebriated outburst and Helen berating my team. The case fell apart practically immediately when the video was shown to their attorney. In a last letter outlining the evidence in agonizing detail and telling them that we would counter-sue for defamation and legal fees should they keep investigating the situation, my lawyer wrote. My lawyer emailed me 2 days later saying, "They've dropped the case. No further action required." Still, Emily's new spouse Adam produced the most unexpected consequences. Several days following the wedding, he gave me a call. "Hey, Matt," he murmured, his voice uncomfortable. She feels terrible about everything. She's just... I know Emily wants to talk to you. She's stuck between you and Helen, and it's tearing her up. I get it, I replied, but it has to come from her if she wants to talk. I'm not going to hunt her down. I will tell her, he said. I hung there with an odd optimism. Perhaps Emily and I still had time to write things. Most likely not. In any case, that was a victory in my book since I had at last stood up for myself. A few weeks after the upheaval calmed down, Emily sent a text. Hey, could we get together? I feel like we ought to talk. Unclear about how to feel, I fixed my gaze on the message. One could argue Emily was reaching out. I couldn't, however, rid the persistent uncertainty. From me now, what did she want? Against better taste, I consented to see her. We convened in a little cafe, one I visited before when launching my company. Though it was neutral ground, I felt a strain in the air. Emily arrived already drinking a coffee. She looked up and grinned, an uncomfortable, strained smile that fell short of her eyes. She said, pointing for me to sit, "Hey," I said, seated across from her. "Hey." A protracted silence preceded her speech. She started, "I'm really sorry about everything that happened at the wedding. It became so out of control. I know Helen and Dad said some things they shouldn't have." I arched an eyebrow. "Some things." She turned uneasily in her chair. "Okay, a lot of things. But you have to understand, they were stressed. Weddings are a lot of pressure, and emotions were high. It wasn't personal." I gave out a sour laugh. "Not personal, Emily? They called me an embarrassment. They mocked my business, belittled me, and basically told me I shouldn't have been there. How is that non-personal?" She groaned as though I were the one acting irrationally. "Look, I'm not saying what they did was right, but you pulling out the way you did wasn't fair either. Matt, people are still talking about it. You wrecked the reception." There it was. She wanted to talk for the genuine reason. "So this isn't about what they said or did," I remarked, my tone frigid. "This is about how you look." She spoke rapidly. "That's not what I'm saying," but her protective edge and voice suggested another narrative. "I just think you could have handled it differently. You didn't have to penalize everyone because of what Helen and Dad said." I watched her, wondering whether she really thought what she was saying. Punish everyone? Emily, they hired my company. They insulted me, the owner, in front of everyone. They didn't even bother hiding their disdain. You expect me to just stand there and take it? I expected you to consider someone else besides yourself. She lashed back. This wasn't about you. It was my wedding. Do you know how humiliating it was when everything fell apart? People were asking me what happened, and I had to deal with the fallout while you just walked away. Startled, I slanted back in my chair. So, that's what this is about. Not what they did, not how they treated me. It's about how it inconvenienced you. Her voice raising significantly, she exclaimed, "That's not fair. You're making it impossible. I'm trying to fix this." I asked, "Fix it?" Several times. "Emily, you're seated here blaming me for standing up for myself because it didn't fit into your perfect little wedding narrative. Do you even hear yourself? You haven't once acknowledged what I went through." She crossed her arms and stiffened her face. "Maybe I wouldn't have to say this if you hadn't made everything about you. I invited you to the wedding because I wanted you there. I was trying to include you, but you turned it into a disaster. Though it wasn't grief, I felt a stinging in my chest. This was clear. There was no mistaking this for misinterpretation. Emily wasn't caught between Dad and Helen. She was entitled, manipulative, and unable to own her acts, exactly like them. Rising to pay for my coffee, I threw several bills on the table. "You know, Emily, I'm done. With you, Dad, Helen, all of it. I've spent my whole life being the scapegoat for this family, and I'm not doing it anymore." Her eyes grew wider. "Matt, wait," said. "No," I responded with great clarity. "You're sitting here blaming me for having the audacity to walk away from it. I'm done, Emily, for good. I came to your wedding because I thought maybe things had changed. But all I got was the same disrespect I've dealt with my whole life. Now you're sitting here blaming me." She sat there startled as I left the cafe. I chatted with her last just before that. Over the next few days, she texted me a handful. I didn't bother replying. Not one thing to say remained. I believed her when she showed me her true self. Regarding Helen and Dad, I entirely cut them out of my life, and that was the best choice I have ever made. My business prospered in the next months, partly due to the flood of fresh customers who had been delighted by the way professionally my staff managed the wedding crisis. Though all Helen and Dad did was make me stronger, they could have tried to bring me down. Emily? She turned into simply another element of my background. Family is about respect, not about blood. Neither of them had shown me any either. Furthermore, really, I have no regrets about a thing,